Good evening, everyone. It is 6:31 p.m. I'll declare this agenda briefing forum is now open. I'd like to invite Councillor Mel Rosa to read the Acknowledgement of Country. Oh, sorry? No? Oh, sorry. Understood that you were. Do you wish me to do it, or you're able to do it? That's all right. Not a problem. Nunjarapan Wajak Nunga Buja Yakan Nija Bilya Barduk. I'm honoured to be standing on Wajak country, Nunga country on the banks of the Swan River. Nankadich Nunga Mort Ken Kadak Nija Wajak Nunga Buja. Nankadich Nija Nunga Brudia Kora Yeye. Border Balapan Mordich Nunga Kadajan Mort Webuja Yeye. I acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land and respect past, present and emerging leaders, their continuing cultural heritage, beliefs and relationship with the land which continues to be important today. Nanyunka Balapan Nunga Brudia We Mort Nijabuja. I thank them for the contribution made to life in the town of Victoria Park and to this region. Item 4 on the agenda is announcements from the presiding member. At 4.1, the purpose of the agenda briefing forum is to provide an opportunity for elected members to ask questions and obtain additional information on officer reports in the draft ordinary council meeting agenda. It is not a decision-making forum, nor is it open for debate. Members of the public that may be directly affected by an item on the agenda can make presentations, deputations, statements and ask questions prior to the matter being formally considered by council at the next ordinary council meeting. 4.2, notice of recording and live streaming. All participation in this forum will be audio and visually recorded, and it is being live streamed on the town's website. The live stream will be archived and made available on the town's website after the meeting. 4.3 is conduct of the meeting. All those in attendance are expected to extend due courtesy and respect to the meeting by refraining from making any adverse or defamatory remarks regarding council, the town's staff or any elected member. No one shall create a disturbance at a meeting by interrupting or interfering with the proceedings through expressing approval or dissent by conversing or by any other means. All questions and statements made by members of the public are not to personalise any elected member or member of the town staff. Questions and statements are to be directed to the presiding member, who may choose to call upon an officer of the town or another elected member to assist with responses. 4.1 is public participation time. There's an opportunity to ask questions and make statements at both the beginning and the end of this forum. The opportunity to ask questions and make statements at the end of the forum is limited to those members of the public who did not participate in the first public participation time that is at the start of the forum. Public participation time will be held for a maximum of 30 minutes. Any additional time that's required must be by agreement from the elected members at the forum, and it will be extended in 5-minute increments. As per our usual practice, there is a limit of 3 questions per person, and 2 minutes is allocated for the making of a statement with 1 statement per person. However, if there are very few people in the audience, we can be more relaxed with those limitations. They are intended to make sure everyone present gets the same fair and equal opportunity to ask their questions and make statements. 4.5, questions taken on notice. Responses to any questions that are taken on notice tonight relating to the agenda items will be presented in the officer report for the ordinary council meeting agenda item under the heading Further Consideration, which appears at the end of that officer report. Item 5 is attendance. Now, we don't have all elected members in attendance tonight. We have 2 apologies from Councillor Ingram and Councillor Cruiser. We also have Councillor Anderson, who is attending online, and we can see you now on the screen. Hi, Councillor Anderson. But otherwise, we have all other elected members in attendance. There are a number of the town's executive, management and staff who are here, led by the CEO, who sits to my left, Mr. Carl Askew. There are no elected members on approved leave of absence. Item 6 is declarations of interest. Mr. CEO, are there any declarations of interest, please?
Thank you, Mayor Vernon. I've received 3. Item 13.3, yourself, an impartiality interest. I am patron of the bowling club and have attended meetings of the club committee and events held by the club in the past. Item 13.4, yourself, impartiality. I have attended hospitality events held by West Coast Eagles, in addition to meetings with the CEO and board members in the past. And item 13.6, yourself, Mayor Vernon, impartiality. I am Council's appointed representative on MRC and have been involved in MRC's decision-making in relation to waste to energy over the last 4 years.
Thanks, Mr. CEO. Are there any other elected members who have an interest that they wish to declare? Now is the time to do so. I will just remind you, if you think as we're going through the matters tonight that there is an interest that you haven't declared, please let me know immediately and we'll take your declaration at that stage. So we now move to item 7 on the agenda, which is public participation time, which I'm now going to open at 6:36 p.m. We have a couple of people who have pre-indicated that they would like to either ask questions or make a statement. I'm going to call those people in the order in which they appear on my list, and after that, fear not, I will go back to the public gallery and ask if there was anyone else who would like to either ask questions or make statements. So, first on the list is Nick Hidding. If I could please invite you to come forward. You'll just press the microphone on and state your name and either your suburb or the purpose for your attendance at our meeting tonight. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak, and good evening everybody. My name is Nick Hidding, Hidding Urban Planning, representing the landowner at 158 Orong Road in Lathlain. I'm not a resident, I'm a planning consultant acting for a ratepayer. This is in relation to item 12.2, the scheme amendment for the proposed additional use for the purposes of a fast food outlet with drive-through. The site has a long history of being utilised as a fast food outlet with a drive-through, and the infrastructure on site is already established for that purpose. The opportunity for the ongoing use of the property for that was restricted during the scheme change LPS2 when it came into effect last year. And our client only became aware of that when they engaged with the town on a new proposal for a new tenant for that site. So we were engaged to submit a scheme amendment to add back the fast food outlet with the drive-through use in order for the property to continue being utilised as such. The officer's recommendation in front of you tonight is to support the scheme amendment, and we support that. However, there is a condition that's proposed to restrict the trading hours of the drive-through, and we wish for that to be deleted. And my submission that I uploaded included a few reasons as to why we believe that would be appropriate. If I have time, I'll just quickly cover those. Obviously, the previous use of the land for the fast food outlet with the drive-through did not have any restriction. All of the neighbours in the vicinity are the same, and our clients have spoken to those, and there was no previous issue with the utilisation of the drive-through unrestricted. There are other uses in the immediate area that are able to trade 24/7 without restriction. Orong Road already sets the background in terms of noise, lighting and traffic, and we believe that the operation of this site, as it was already established in 2004 when the town approved it, will not add unnecessarily to any amenity impact. And in addition, the development site is set back from private property. It's totally surrounded by road reserves, giving an adequate level of setback and buffer, and the development is at least 30 metres to the nearest home. So we believe that it's appropriate for there to be no condition on the trading hours of the drive-through associated with the fast food outlet. We're otherwise very supportive of the recommendation for the council to initiate the scheme amendment. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mr. Hidding. I'm just going to ask you a question, only because although you're not doing a deputation where we would throw it open for questions, since this matter is on the agenda for next week, regarding your statement of opposition by your client to the imposition of conditions or restrictions on the operating hours, given that I'm going to assume that you're aware that from when the approval was first given in 2004 until when the site commenced doing COVID testing in 2020, that its operation as a fast food outlet drive-through occurred during daytime hours, and there were no other operators or uses of the site whose business hours extended beyond the afternoon. So in terms of that, whilst I hear what you say that the previous approval didn't have any restrictions on the operating hours, the actual use of the site by long-standing tenants was to use it only during daytime hours. So in that regard, is there anything you would wish to say on behalf of your client as to why we shouldn't consider further the proposal for operating hour restrictions to reflect the fact that the community were used to a use of the site that saw most of the business conclude by the middle of the day?
Thanks very much for the question. You are correct in saying that the long-standing history of the site was for predominantly mornings and early afternoons. That tenant has obviously since left quite some time ago. It's about the opportunity for our client to attract a new tenant, and that can be problematic sometimes when there's restriction on trade. So at the moment there's a tenant that's interested that will obviously wanted to operate late afternoon into the evenings as well. With the ability to also potentially trade early mornings from tenants for that purpose, but recognise obviously that there has been history that it hasn't been utilised obviously through the night, but it's about that future opportunity that we're seeking.
So is there anything further you'd like to say as to why it would be the case that a tenant in the open market would need the ability to trade a drive-through beyond, say, midnight, unless you're talking about a potential operator who would operate the site 24 hours a day?
Well, that's correct. There might be an opportunity for a tenant to operate the site 24/7. There might be, and that's what our client would like to obviously allow for, and not have unnecessarily restrictions on that. Yeah.
All right. Thank you for elaborating on that for us. It's obviously important that we have as much information as we need when it comes time to make our decision. So thank you for that. All right. Appreciate your time. Next on the list, Vince Maxwell.
Good evening, Vince Maxwell from Victoria Park. I've got some questions on 13.5 to do with the waste collection tender that the council's considering this month. Just firstly, the council has delegated authority to the CEO to issue fines of up to $5,000 for residents for placing incorrect items in their bins. Are you aware of the video recorded in Victoria Park showing both the green FOGO bin and the red general waste bin being emptied in the same waste truck?
Yes, we are, Mr Maxwell. That was brought to the council and town's attention on the day that occurred, which was a week last Friday. Inquiries were made to Cleanaway, our collection contractor, and they were able to identify the driver of the vehicle, who admitted that in a moment of inadvertence he made a mistake doing his round and accidentally picked up both of the bins that were on the verge, as he'd previously been doing the green FOGO bin collection and then had moved on to a red bin collection. And so in a moment of inadvertence he moved the bin very short space and collected both bins. The good news is that the bin truck he was driving was a general waste collection bin truck. So in other words, it was designed for the contents of the red bin. So when he loaded in the contents of the green FOGO bin into that bin, it didn't contaminate the contents of the truck because they were already general waste. Would have been a different story if it was the other way around. So it has been identified. Cleanaway have indicated to us a series of measures that they're putting in place to improve driver awareness, including using technology within the bin truck itself to assist the drivers to make sure they're alert to all of the collections they need to do. So as far as we're concerned, we've accepted Cleanaway's explanation of what occurred on this occasion, and this is the only one that has been brought to our attention to the best of my knowledge. Do you have another question?
Thank you. So the agenda recommends the award of a waste collection contract to respondent A. Is that the contractor recommended for appointment the same contractor that currently provides the town's waste collection services?
I'm going to direct that question to the Chief Financial Officer, Mr Old.
Mayor, can I just seek clarification if I can reveal that currently confidential information, because obviously this is still under assessment and subject to award?
Yes, I mean, my understanding would have been that you wouldn't be in a position to disclose that information tonight anyway. Is that correct?
We haven't corresponded back to the other applicants, so...
Yes, as I understand it, we're not in a position to disclose the identity of the respondent to whom it's intended the tender be awarded, as per normal practices when we deal with tenders. Until such time as the award is made, we don't disclose the identity of the contractor. That's because we do have a number of people who put in a tender. Is that right? Yep. Mr. CFO confirms that's the case, Mr. Maxwell, so we can't identify who the proposed tenderer is at this stage.
Okay, thank you. Got some questions on item 14.1, the statement of accounts. In the payment summary, on the first listed payment is $15,000 to the four-wheel drive show on the 28th of April 2026. There's no description provided. Can you advise what this payment was for?
Yep, Mr. CFO.
Thank you, Mayor. By good fortune, one of the elected members did ask that earlier in today, and I understand that's a refund of a bond. So it's not a sponsorship, it's a refund of a bond.
Mr. Maxwell.
And I take it that description will be added.
So I think in terms of changing the description, Mr. Old, we do have some capacity, I think, to manually change descriptors, don't we, when we identify that the description doesn't best meet the nature of the payment that we made. So,
I'm certainly not certain. I'm pretty sure we can do that. I can't see why we couldn't do that, yes, for the proper agenda proper.
We have already received that question from elected members actually earlier today, Mr. Maxwell, so the staff did provide an answer to it that clarified what the purpose of it was, that it was a refund. So I think your point is well made and we can take that on board, and we have in the past made adjustments manually to the descriptors to match the payments. Do you have another question?
Thank you. The Chief Financial Officer has previously advised that staff are incapable of producing a monthly report identifying purchases made outside the town's purchasing system, that is, purchase orders raised after invoices were received. And the town had previously advised the auditor and the council that such reporting would be implemented, and in fact had commenced. However, as you know, last month the CFO advised that instead of reporting these purchase orders after invoices, that instead a sample of transactions is reviewed each month to assess compliance. So my question is, of the approximately 450 payments processed in April 2026, which specific transactions were selected for review as part of that compliance sampling process?
Mr. Old?
I don't know that on hand. I have to take that on notice.
All right, we'll take that on notice.
Just a follow-up on that. Can the town provide councillors with the results of that sample review, so including the number of non-compliant transactions identified?
Well, I think for the purposes of the agenda briefing forum, Mr. Maxwell, unlike a council meeting, this is intended for questions to be asked and answers to be provided. So if you're asking a question of the administration, whether they can provide that information to elected members, I can ask that question of the Chief Financial Officer, noting that it's a matter for the town as to what operational information is presented to us. Mr. Old?
I'll take that question on notice as well. I would have to see what the nature, or I know what the nature of the information is, but just review the most recent report that was produced.
All right, so we'll take that on notice. Mr. Maxwell?
Thank you. Just one other question. In the fuel and store card transactions payment summary, does this summary include all of the fuel and oil purchases the town made during that month?
Mr. Old?
For 100% certainty, I'll take that on notice, but I would assume it would.
We'll take that on notice, Mr. Maxwell.
Okay, thanks. I just got a very short statement, if I may.
Yep, that's fine.
So the council's role under the Act is to oversee the allocation of the town's finances and resources. The council is also responsible for determining the town's policies, including the procurement policy. So dismissing this as an operational matter does not remove your responsibility. In the same way that you, the council, are responsible for allowing the town to operate without adequate management structures that resulted in the cutting down of 50 trees, you are also responsible for any fraudulent activity that may occur or may have occurred due to staff routinely bypassing the town's procurement policy, your policy. So governance is not simply about approving policies, it is about ensuring those policies are followed. And when councillors choose not to ask questions, or not to seek evidence, and not to demand compliance, they become accountable for the failures that follow. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Maxwell. Is there anyone else in the public gallery who would like to either ask questions or make a statement? No? All right, on that basis, I'm going to close public participation time at 6:52 p.m. Thank you. Item 8 on the agenda is presentations. There are none. Item 9, deputations. We have none. Before I go to item 10, which is the method of dealing with agenda business, I will just let the meeting know that I have received notification from Councillor Anderson, who's online, of a declaration of impartiality interest on item 13.4, as she has attended events held by the West Coast Eagles Football Club. So thank you, and I think Councillor Anderson has sent through a written declaration to that effect. All right, so we're going to move on to item 10, which is the method of dealing with agenda business. As per our usual practice, I will read out the item numbers for the agenda for which questions have been asked, and we will go from there and see how many of these items we are going to get through tonight. As usual, if you have submitted questions and you've received answers to your questions and you're satisfied with those answers and you don't wish to ask the questions in tonight's forum, please let me know which of those item numbers you want removed from the list, because they will be the only item numbers that we are presenting for questions tonight. I just need a moment to confer with the Manager of Governance, since we have a late apology from one elected member who's submitted a number of questions on these items, and there are no other questions from other elected members on the items, which means they'll probably be coming off the list. All right, so these are the item numbers that we'll be going through for questions from elected members tonight. So item 12.2, initiation of scheme amendment for additional use. Item 12.3, technology park scheme amendment. Community consultation responses. Item 13.1, Basinghall Street parking changes adjacent Southbank Montessori Childcare Centre. Item 13.3, 18 Kent Street, Victoria Park Bowling Club lease renewal. Item 13.4, Lathlain Park West Coast Eagles deed of agreement. And item 13.5, tender TVP 2512 waste collection and management services. Now, are there any of those item numbers that people no longer wish to ask questions about? Or are there any items which people have not yet indicated but wish to have questions asked about that we will add to the list? Councillor Biondi.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can I add, sorry, where are we? the annual review of delegations, please. I just have one question in relation to that. My apologies for not sending my questions through earlier. And the Western Power easement as well, 13.2.
All right, thank you. I've added those in. Is there anyone else? Councillor Anderson? No? All right, thank you. All right, well, they're the item numbers that we'll go through. So beginning with item 11, which covers the Chief Executive Officer reports. So we'll go to item 11.2, annual review of delegations. I'll go to you, Councillor Biondi.
Wonderful, thank you, Madam Mayor. Just in relation to a couple of these items on the attachment. So are these, just for my understanding, are these annual review of delegations, do they reflect what would be in an officer's JDF, or are they updated before, or do they talk to a JDF?
Right, I'll refer that to the CEO, Mr. Askew.
Thank you, Councillor, for the question. No, it's not usual. The delegations will be listed in a JDF. They will be listed, excuse me, in a sub-delegations register where all officers are then recorded as having sub-delegations.
Thank you. It was, sorry, just to clarify, it was more so, do the delegations reflect the roles and responsibilities that an officer would have, and does that talk to that? What's in a JDF doesn't have to necessarily be listed, if that makes sense.
Mr. CEO?
Yes, it does relate to their role and their responsibilities, yes.
Thank you. Just some of these requested changes, just looking, it talks a little bit about contracts and contract processes, and just being mindful of the fact that we are going through a bit of a contract and project management review as part of Elizabeth Bailey and what's happened there. Would some of these perhaps be, would it be suitable or appropriate to maybe defer those delegations until we've had that proper review of our systems, or would it be, is there a need now for these changes for efficiency purposes?
Mr. CEO?
Thank you for the question, Councillor. No, in my opinion, I don't think we need to necessarily wait for that review. I think we would put those to Council as and when the policy returns to Council, and then if there's a need for an alteration of delegations, we'd be making those recommendations at that time.
Thanks, Councillor Biondi. So I do have a question with regards to the proposed change regarding tenders for goods and services. The proposal to allow the chiefs to authorise variations and extensions to contracts. The officer's rationale indicates that currently only the CEO or the council have the power to vary any contract. Can the administration please let council know how many times in the last, I'll say 2 years just for the time being, has there been a need to bring a contract back to council to vary the contract? Happy for anyone to step in and say they'll answer that question or take it on notice. Yep. Mr. Old?
We will take that on notice, but there is one that does stick in my memory, and that was in December, and I can't remember the year, where the Microsoft license, for example, was a pre-existing contract, and I think it was in the range of 350,000 or 400 at the time, and just by the annual subscription increasing and escalation, we had to do a late item to say the contract is still in place, but we request an additional delegation. In fact, it was under the previous CEO, so it's probably 3 years ago now. But that is a fair question. We'll take that on notice for comprehensive data.
All right, well, if that's the case, then I'd like to have that information presented over the last 5 years because my memory usually serves me pretty well and I have very limited recollection of this ever being need to be presented to us. So I'm looking to identify the problem that we're trying to solve with this particular one that is here in regard to those matters. So in terms of... so that was 1.1.16, that question related to, and I have the exact same question, which I'm happy to be taken on notice again, for 1.1.16a, which is the tenders for goods and services tender exempt procurement, where currently the CEO and the council have the power to vary any contract in that regard. And so now it's proposed that that be extended to the chiefs for what looks like the exact same rationale. So I'll seek the same question for that. How many times in the last 5 years has it been necessary to seek to vary the contract in relation to a tender exempt procurement for this matter? Those are my questions. Councillor Biondi, you had something else you want to follow up with?
Yeah, sorry, just one more question. With some of these delegations, are there dollar limits associated with them in terms of how much is associated with the delegation? And if so, is it possible to just understand what they might be?
So is that in relation to the power to vary the contracts? So my understanding is that it's 250,000, I think. I'll go to Mr. CEO for that. Yep, 250,000. Any other questions on this item? Councillor Minson.
Thank you, Matt. Just following on from your two questions, would it also be possible, I guess, to understand the number of times that this has occurred between the proposed values? So I guess values variations between the 500,000 and the 250,000. So I guess with a similar kind of understanding to understand how often, I guess, that separate delegation is required.
So I think that in part that might be covered by my question because in the last 5 years we moved from the delegations to increase them for the CEO from 250,000 to 500,000. And if memory serves me correct, the increase to 500,000 may have occurred since you came on council, Ms. Councillor Minson. So I think the 5-year window would cover the old one, the old delegated cap. It possibly between the 250 up to 500, it's possibly that 5-year window is getting close to being about equal in terms of time frame. If you think we need to go further back than 5 years, please say so. Happy to do that because otherwise I can't think of a way that you would do the comparison. But if you're covering those 5 years anyway where there was an increase, you're likely to see the difference anyway, especially if we ask for the breakdown by year.
Maybe I'll just clarify, I guess, the practicality of looking at variations that were over 500,000 for the last 5 years and looking at the number of variations that were between 250 and 500,000 for the last 5 years, and that would give us a good idea if that's practical.
Right, happy to take that on notice and we can add that to those questions in relation to it. So we've got those noted down. Anything further? No. Any other questions on delegations? No, all right. On that basis, we will move on to item 12.2, which is initiation of scheme amendment for additional use. So, moving forward. Councillor Minson, I understand you had questions in relation to this matter.
Yes, thank you, Matt. So my question is around understanding the merits between granting a P permitted use against that of potentially an A discretionary advertised use. Thank you.
Yep, I'll refer that to our Chief Community Planner, Mr. Doy.
Thanks, Mayor Vernon. Thanks for the question, Councillor Minson. So designating the proposed use as a permitted use, a P use, would, if the scheme amendment is approved and gazetted, enable the drive-through component to immediately recommence operation without requiring the separate submission, assessment and approval of an application for development approval. You're also asking about an A use as well. Yep. So alternatively, designating the proposed use as an A or discretionary use would, if the scheme amendment is approved and gazetted, require separate submission, assessment, public advertising and approval of an application for development approval before the drive-through component could recommence operation.
Thank you. Just a follow-up question. So while I don't necessarily have a concern with the current proposal and or how it's been operated in the past continuing, I understand the kind of rationale there. Does the town have an opinion of kind of an appropriate way to, and whether or not they see this as a risk that out into the future, if this was a permitted use for fast food, into the future in the scheme, that what's the appropriate way to control, I guess, a future proposal which might be more intensive than what's currently envisioned at the moment. So I'm not sure if that's the appropriate way between the P and the A classification or another kind of mechanism.
Mr. Doy?
Thanks, Mayor Vernon. Well, first of all, the provisions of the scheme and all of our local planning policies will deal with anything other than what's being proposed as part of this scheme amendment. For instance, it was a mixed-use dwelling or some other intense development, but in the context of what's being proposed tonight, it is the extra. We're proposing to manage it through that extra condition within the scheme amendment around the opening hours being between 6 a.m. and midnight, and that would be the only way to manage it under its current proposal as a P use. The only other way would be as a discretionary use, where we would be able to assess the development and may require certain things as part of that development application.
Just another follow-up. So just to try to give a specific example, for instance, if it was a fast food outlet in the future, a potential development, and it was something quite intensive like a McDonald's or, something, a big fast food chain that potentially has a lot of cars going to, and it has a lot more traffic impact than what's envisioned, I guess, under this proposal. Yeah, you're saying that other than having conditions listed now, that under a P use, the other option's an A.
Mr. Doy?
Thanks, Mayor Vernon. If it was in the current form, so if it was to, if the proposal was to demolish the current building and propose lots of car parking and a reconfiguration, that would still require a development application. But if it was a McDonald's, for instance, let's say, or Hungry Jack's or something like that, in the current building in its current format, with a permitted use, that has the potential to go through without requiring a development application.
Thank you.
Anything further, Councillor Minson? No? All right. I do also have some questions which I sent through earlier today. So in drafting local planning scheme number 2, what was the rationale for the town making the land use classification of fast food outlet drive-through a not permitted use in the local centre zone, given the original 2004 approval for this land to be used as a fast food outlet drive-through? Mr. Doy.
Thanks, Mayor Vernon. The designation of fast food outlet drive-through as an X or prohibited use in a local centre zone under local planning scheme number 2 was based upon this use generally not being consistent with objectives for this zone, such as serving the day-to-day needs of the local community, and the built form typically not being consistent with the desired built form that we're after for a local centre. This was determined, though, in general terms, looking across all land zoned local centre, and did not consider the specific circumstances of this particular site, which adjoins a regional road, Orong Road, and where the use was previously approved.
Thank you. Can I just follow up with your answer to that question? The land that's zoned local centre under LPS number 2, does that extend beyond Lathlain? Is that local centre for the whole of the town or local centre just in that area? Because your answer described this as it became a prohibited use because fast food outlet drive-through was generally not consistent with objectives for this zone, suggesting something other than the whole town. Does that make sense, Mr. Doy?
Thanks, Mayor Vernon. Yeah, we have the local centre zone is used in other areas throughout the town. Local Planning Scheme number 2 prescribes a fast food outlet drive-through use as being prohibited in all of those local centres, but for this particular site, we didn't necessarily look at it specifically for that X use.
Thank you. So does that mean that this particular area was not zoned local centre? Because I know obviously in other parts of Lathlain we have Lathlain Place and Gallipoli Street, which clearly do have, to the unplanner terminology that I would use, a local activity centre feel to them. But I'm trying to work out, when you say we have lots of local activity centre zones, trying to get a handle on where this one is in this location, Mr. Doy.
So we have other local centre zones from memory, and I would probably need to cross-check this, but it is for places like Lathlain Place, Etwell Street. Those places will have a local centre zone designation. This area does as well. In all of the local, as part of a local centre zone, it comes with an X use for a fast food outlet drive-through. But we didn't necessarily contemplate this particular lot when we were thinking about that X use.
Okay, so in the officer report, where we actually have the aerial maps of the area showing the cluster of small shops at what I've always called them the Francisco Street shops, was that designated a local centre in our LPS number 2?
Thanks, Mayor Vernon. So if I'm understanding your question, you're asking whether the subject site is currently designated as a local centre zone?
Yes, because as I say, the photographs that are contained in the applicant's scheme amendment report do show the current surrounding areas. If you look at site area, which is 2.2, which is page 7 of the applicant's report, you can see the subject land, but you can see some of the tenancies across the street on Francisco from it. And then 2.3 has got current and surrounding land use, and there's even higher bird's eye view showing the complete series of tenancies that are directly across the road from this subject land. And so I'm wondering, was there a local centre zone in this area? Was it confined to the shops across the road from the subject land, and the subject land simply was overlooked in the consideration of what constituted the local centre zone? Mr. Doy.
Thanks, Mayor Vernon. No, it was not overlooked. So both this site and the shops across the road were designated as a local centre zone.
Okay, thank you. I understand that better now, so appreciate that clarification. My next question is, from the time of the initial approval in 2004 by the town as a fast food outlet drive-through, until its repurposing for COVID-19 testing in 2020. Firstly, was this land used for any other business apart from a drive-through coffee outlet to the best of the town's knowledge, and if so, what other uses? Mr. Doy?
Thanks, Mayor Vernon. To the best of my understanding, it was is understood that the premises was only used as a cafe with drive-through during this time.
Thank you. Next part of that question, was the land used for any business to the town's knowledge that lawfully operated between the hours of 6 a.m. until midnight? Mr. Doy?
Thanks, Mayor Vernon. It is understood that the use as a cafe with drive-through may have operated from 5 a.m. until mid-afternoon, although it could have lawfully operated at any time without restriction.
So my next question then is, this relates to if the council were to accept the recommendation for approval of the property as a fast food outlet drive-through. Going to focus firstly on the officer's proposal that there be a restriction on the operating hours from 6 a.m. to 11:59 p.m. daily. Can the town please elaborate on how it considers that would not involve an intensification of the scale of the use of the existing premises? And I'm not now talking about the possibility that the premises get upgraded or redeveloped in the future. Mr. Doy?
From the town's perspective, it doesn't result in an intensification because of its previous because previously there was no restriction, and this scheme amendment seeks to impose a time restriction that wasn't there before, therefore limiting the use of a fast food outlet drive-through between 6 and 12. So from our perspective, it's actually a reduction in intensification in terms of what's approvable.
Okay, so that last point, when you say it's a reduction in intensification of what's approvable, but it's not necessarily a reduction in intensification of how the property might be used depending on who becomes the tenant. Is that the right understanding, Mr. Doy?
Thanks, Mayor Vernon. Correct.
Okay, so the applicant's submission does rely on a representation that there is to be no material built form changes proposed to the existing building, which I take that to be the existing building and the drive-through design that's attached to the building, and that this request shows that the visual impact of the development remains consistent with the existing character of the locality. So if this scheme amendment were to be approved, I think this is part of the answers to Councillor Minson's question. I just want to be clear, this approval of the scheme amendment will enable the applicant to subsequently seek to redevelop the property into potentially a larger fast food outlet drive-through, even though that's not currently being proposed, and without restrictions, we would then be in a position of being unable to try to then put back some conditions in place if there was then a desire to do so because of a future proposal to intensify the use of the site. Mr. Doy?
Thanks, Mayor. Yes, I understand the question. So the proposed scheme amendment would allow the site to be used as a fast food outlet drive-through, which could be either within the existing building or a redeveloped building on the site, with the latter requiring an application for development approval. So that's the key point. So a redeveloped building on the site requires an application for development approval, as I said before to Councillor Minson. However, if there is a concern regarding the possible redevelopment of the site with a larger fast food outlet drive-through, then an additional condition could potentially be added, restricting the use of the drive-through to being in association with the existing building only. But that is a matter that I would be keen to take on notice and explore further as to the possibility of that condition being correct.
So obviously we've heard a statement on behalf of the applicant this evening that urges council not to impose any restrictions on the operating hours to provide the owner with the greatest degree of flexibility in the market to seek a suitable tenant for the building. If we were not talking about a scheme amendment, but we were talking about something that was a discretionary use for this area, what would the town's view be about approval conditions for a facility of this nature at this location having the potential to be able to allow or to be allowed to operate with unrestricted business hours, meaning 24/7 potentially? Would the town have a different view about that. I apologise for the non-planner-like speak. I always get a little lost when I start talking town planning stuff. I hope I'm making myself clear. If I'm not, I'll try and say it again. It's like, if this were not needing a scheme amendment and we were potentially facing a development application for that site, given it's in a local centre, to potentially put a fast food outlet with a drive-through on the site that could operate 24 hours a day, would the town have a view about the suitability of such a development, or would it have a different view? Mr. Doy.
Thanks, Mayor Vernon. No, I understand that question. My suspicion would be that through a development application process that we would still seek to provide a condition of that development approval to limit the hours of operation to conserve the amenity of the surrounding community.
Thank you. And in the scenarios we've just talked about, whether it's through this scheme amendment and then a subsequent development application for the site that might see a greater intensification of the use, versus if we were looking at this completely separately to a scheme amendment, because you could potentially do something like intensify the use of that site, which options involve a level of public consultation with the surrounding landowners? Mr. Doy.
Thanks, Mayor Vernon. If I don't answer this in the way that if I'm not answering the question, please ask it again. But if the scheme were to include, if the permissibility for a fast food outlet drive-through was not it wasn't a P use, it was an A use, so it was discretionary, then an A use for this area would require advertising to the community for a period of time as part of a development application or any other planning application.
Okay. Yep. Thank you. I think that was the point that you were making to Councillor Mintz, and I just wanted to make sure that I was certain about that. Is it open then to council to consider other hours of operation other than the ones suggested in the officer's report, if it were considered that that was something that might be necessary or reasonable to ensure the ongoing amenity of the local surrounding residential property owners? Mr. Doy.
Thanks, Mayor Vernon. Yes, it is.
All right, thank you. I don't have any further questions. Are there any questions on this application? Councillor Biondi.
Thanks, Mayor Vernon. So just to clarify, if there is a works component, it would require a development application. If it's strictly land use only, it does not under the current proposal. Is that right?
Mr. Doy.
Thanks for the question, Councillor Biondi. Yes.
Thank you. Just on that, obviously we've had a bit of discussion and about whether it's a P, D or A. Would it be open to council to have, if it were to remain a P, because it would be nice to see this site activated, to put some additional conditions perhaps around making sure that the use itself operating within the existing building, such as perhaps a site management plan prior to occupancy or something like that, just to provide, I guess, officers with the ability, if there were some sort of compliance issues or concerns later down the track, to be able to, I guess, measure or provide a bit more sort of documentation, and that would, in my mind, potentially be able to provide some flexibility to different tenants as well, but they would just have to do a little bit more rigour to get the use operating at the site, if that question makes sense.
Mr. Doy.
Thanks, Mayor Vernon. Yes, I understand. It is open to council to provide conditions which form part of the additional use rights for this site. If the question, if I am so bold to ask, is it the administration's preference for that to be the case, the answer would be no. If we were to prefer that the site is carefully considered, there was advertising, there was further potential management implications, it would be to put it through a development application process and manage it in that way, which would then mean it would be we would not be taking it to a P use.
Thank you for being bold, Mr. Joy. Just through the chair. I was too busy cracking a joke, and now I've lost track of my question.
It's one of the best moments of my day.
Yeah,
When it happens to me.
It might come back to me in a moment. I'm so sorry. Other councillors may have questions.
That's all right. Are there any other questions in relation to this particular item? No? All right. Well, don't forget we still have another couple of weeks through until the council meeting. And obviously I note that the applicant and his representative have remained in the chamber to hear those questions. So there's obviously an opportunity for you to consider what impact they might have and any further information you'd like to send through. And obviously there is an opportunity to speak at the ordinary council meeting. But that might be something that might be worthwhile considering as to whether or not there's anything that you would like to say that might assist council in understanding whether it could consider operating hour restrictions or other conditions that would create a degree of certainty or assurance that the local surrounding residential properties will have their amenity preserved as best they possibly can. Not saying that to prejudge the matter, but that's the tenor of some of the questions that have been asked to understand what is available in this space. So thank you for that. All right, we will now move on to item 12.3, Technology Park Scheme Amendment Community Consultation Responses. Councillor Minson, you had some questions about the Tech Park matter?
Yes, thank you, Matt. The question was, did we receive a response from the beneficiary of the restrictive covenant? My understanding that being the Minister for State Development.
I refer that question to Mr. Doy.
Thanks, Mayor Vernon. Thanks for the question, Councillor Minson. No, however, the following is stated within the applicant's planning report. Further engagement is being undertaken alongside the assessment of this scheme amendment to obtain the Minister for State Development's formal support as per the direction of the Department of Planning, Lands and Heritage. However, the town's officers will seek an update on this engagement prior to OCM.
Councillor Minson.
Thank you. And I guess, don't expect that the Minister for State Development has a different view than, the Minister for Planning or in between the departments. But in the case that I guess there is a different view that the beneficiary of this restrictive covenant, does have a different view, would that change the outcome of, I guess, the recommendation here?
Mr. Doy.
Thanks, Mayor Vernon. It wouldn't change our recommendation. We've worked collaboratively with the Department of Planning and Development WA in the preparation of the precinct structure plan, which is currently being out for advertising. This scheme amendment does relate to that in somewhat, so it wouldn't change our recommendation.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions with regard to this particular item, 12.3, Technology Park? None? I just wanted to ask a really quick question about the officer recommendation. I note that there's a difference between the proposal in relation to the last item, which is also for a scheme amendment, and this particular one, which says in the recommendation at point 3, authorises the CEO to submit the amendment to the WA Planning Commission for final approval and ministerial consent. So given that the previous item requires us to submit the proposed scheme amendment to the Minister for consent to advertise, meaning the last item, the scheme amendment, would come back to us for adoption, is that right? Whereas this one goes to the WAPC and then on to the Minister, and is at the end of it we have nothing more to do with regards to approval of the scheme amendment. Is that right, Mr Doy?
Thanks, Mayor Vernon. Yeah, the previous item, you would be in providing endorsement for the WAPC to then provide approval for it to go to advertising. So that was 12.2. This one has 12.3 has already been through a period of advertising, which was given consent to by the WAPC. So it's already had its advertising moment. Submissions have been received. And now it's come back to Council for final endorsement to go off to the Department of Planning and then WAPC for final approval, and then on to the Minister for final approval.
Thank you. So just have one final question to understand what happens now, or what happens assuming Council agrees to progress the scheme amendment. And let's say the scheme amendment is then endorsed by the WAPC and the Minister. Does the town then have a role to play with regards to, I'm going to call it precinct planning for Technology Park's future without all these restrictive covenants? Mr Doy?
Thanks, Mayor Vernon. Yeah, we absolutely have a role to play. So precinct structure planning is well and truly underway for Bentley Technology Park. It's a collaborative effort between Development WA, the Department of Planning, City of South Perth, and the Town of Victoria Park. And that draft precinct structure plan has been prepared, is currently out for advertising with our community at the moment. And once that advertising has concluded, it will be finalised and be able to be considered by the town.
Okay, thank you. So the precinct structure plan, does it require any level of endorsement by our council, or because it's being led by the state, it only goes to the WA Planning Commission and the Minister, and then we just get to see it afterwards, or does it come through us for a level of approval, Mr Doy?
Thanks, Mayor Vernon. No, that precinct structure plan will come to the town for consideration, the town's council for consideration.
All right, thank you. Good to know. Any other questions in relation to this item? No? All right, so we will move on then to item 13.1, Basinghall Street parking changes adjacent Southbank Montessori Childcare Centre. Councillor Minson, you had some questions in relation to this item?
Yes, thank you. It was in relation to the meetings held with the Montessori School. So what were the outcomes of the meetings with Southbank Montessori School and the Nurture and Nature Private Preschool? Particularly were they supportive of the proposed changes?
Sure, refer that question to our Chief Operations Officer, Ms Lubicus.
Thanks, Mayor Vernon. Thanks, Councillor Minson. Yes, we did speak to the Southbank Montessori School and they were supportive. Their users are having a few access issues and things that they're hoping to resolve through these actions.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Minson. Any other questions about this item? No? All right. Thank you. We're getting through these nice and quick. Next one is item 13.2, which is the Oat Street, Shepperton Road, Western Power Easement. Councillor Biondi, you've got some questions in relation to this item.
I do. Thank you, Mayor. Through the Chair. So just noting in the report that... actually, sorry, I'm probably asking my questions in the wrong order. Let me just gather my thoughts. Did Western Power provide a copy of their valuation, their in-house valuation? And if so, what was it? Why is everyone laughing?
It's just the inherent nature of that question and the entity to which it is focused. Ms Labicus.
Thank you, Mayor Vernon. No, Western Power did not supply their valuation.
Councillor Biondi.
Yeah, thank you. Can we compel them to provide that valuation? Did we ask?
Well, the answer to the first question is no, we don't have power over the state government. But as to the answer to the second question, can we request it, Ms Labicus, or did we request it?
I'll take that one on notice. Thank you.
All right, we'll take that on notice. Anything further, Councillor Biondi?
Thank you. Yes, just a few more questions. So just noting in the report that the additional money, if I'm correct, as part of the deal, would go to the Future Projects Reserve. Do we have any sort of indication or inspiration as to what that money could be used for? And if you just give me a little bit more background about what the Future Project Reserve entails.
I'm going to refer that question to the Chief Financial Officer, Mr Old.
I may need Mr Dewey's assistance. I understand some of the proceeds are going to be used for the Oak Street precinct plan. Have I got that correct from this? Probably put you on the spot. I'd have to take that on notice because I don't know offhand. The Future Projects Reserve is generally for future projects. We've used it in the past for significant projects if there perhaps been a budget variance that we need. But I'll take that on notice. I can't recall exactly.
All right, looks like Mr Doy's got something to add to that. Mr Doy?
Thanks, Mayor Vernon. Yes, I'll have a go. The compensation to do with the easement was originally required to be spent, or was agreed to be spent on precinct structure planning for Oats Street Station, and so the proceeds that have been received today have been used for that purpose. Considering, however, that we will not be doing any further precinct structure planning for Oat Street, that funding is open to be used in other ways.
Anything further, Councillor Biondi?
Yes, just a few more questions. So in terms of Western Power having rights under their Act, which sort of forms the basis of the officer report, are they required to notify us before accessing the land to do any work, or they can just simply go on there and go on their merry way?
I know the answer to that, but Ms Labicus can have the joy of saying it out loud. Ms Labicus?
Thank you, Mayor Vernon. Utilities can access the land at any time.
Thank you. Are there any sort of risks in terms of, I guess, accepting this? Are there any sort of if it needed to be relocated, who would bear the costs? Would they bear the costs? Would we? What sort of, talk me through what would happen in that scenario?
You mean if Western Power wanted to relocate that infrastructure, that would be at their cost. It's their infrastructure. They have rights to place it on land, but clearly depending on who owns the land they want to place it on will depend on what level of compensation they offer. So as you can see, an amount of compensation was offered to us for putting it on our land. But Ms Labicus, anything further to that?
Nothing further to add. Thanks, Mayor Vernon.
But look, I'm fairly certain if they wanted to relocate that infrastructure, given that some of that infrastructure is underground and it runs through our Aqualife Centre land holding, off to the side on the Shepperton Road border of the Aqualife site, and then runs up through the next street along, which I think is Withnell, and then up onto the apron of land on the corner of Oat Street and Shepperton Road. If they were relocating all of that infrastructure out of underground and above ground, I suspect the town would be looking for them to do something to remediate our land holdings of the evidence that they had been on our land and ripped things out. But obtaining compensation or remediation of land from state-based utilities It's not necessarily always the easiest thing in the world. So there might be some disagreements about who gets to do what in that regard. But yeah, look, I think we did spend quite a bit of time, the town and council, on this at the time, because I think, Mr. Doyle will correct me if I'm wrong, there was maybe 8 or more months worth of work as they tried to identify how they could possibly underground the high voltage power lines in this particular area, in such a relatively densely sort of like residentially developed area, and bring it across from state-based infrastructure, namely the train line, to come up and meet the rest of the high voltage power lines and make its way through. So I think that the designs were difficult. It was difficult to get a solution that worked. So at what point, I mean, if they want to do something like that in 20 or 30 years' time when they've found some better methods for doing electricity, then who knows, might be a bit of crystal ball gazing. Does that help? Anything further? No? I might ask a question with regards to the matter of the reserves. So I note that firstly, the officer's recommendation, Mr. Old, I note it doesn't actually say which reserve the proceeds are to be allocated to. It simply says notes that the proceeds and reserve allocation will be recognised in the 26-27 budget. Would it not be more preferable for council to direct the administration as to where that particular compensatory payment should end up, like as in which reserve it should go in? Mr. Old?
Mayor, point 4 says allocates a total compensation amount to the future projects reserve, just above that.
Oh, okay.
So if I may, the intent is we expect to receive this next financial year. Or the balance of it, if we're going to receive it this year, will be a more formal budget amendment. And then from an accounting financial point of view, we anticipate to be 26-27. So instead of doing carry forwards and messing around like that, we'll just allocate it all in next year's budget.
All right. So with the follow-up questions from Councillor Biondi about the choice of that reserve, I actually noted when I drove past the town's land on the corner of Oat Street and Shepperton Road last week, how very stark and barren that parcel of land looks, and how we have made an effort at a small amount of greening on the little tiny side apron of the Swansea Street connection to Oat Street. Is there any opportunity for this funding to go into something more towards an urban forest project on that land? Something more joyous and targeted than the future projects reserve. Mr. Doy for urban forest.
Thanks, Mayor Vernon. It's open. It's always open to council to determine where the funding will be located. Yep. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's just on the basis if it goes to like the future projects reserve, it's just a large pot of money and it just sort of gets subsumed into it. And I feel like we're getting this compensation for a particular reason, and we've traversed across that piece of land, and the impact has been quite significant on the loss of green space in that area. But there's no point in contemplating a greening project if the way the land looks now, together with Western Power's rights of access to their infrastructure, would mean that anything we do there is going to be compromised or shouted down by them. That's what I'm trying to gauge. And, you know, other elected members might have other ideas about what specific amount of money like this could be used for, because clearly we've received 170-odd thousand of it, but we've got the balance of it to come. So it's a reasonable amount of money coming in. Could be projects potentially over more than one budget cycle. So on urban forester, we'll go to you, Mr. Doy.
Yeah, my answer is the same. It's certainly open to council to determine where the funding goes. What I would say with the Shepperton and Oats reserve, the corner lot there, there is a need to come through and do some more what we would call infill planting, which is where we come in the year or two after planting has occurred and fill the spaces where plants have not survived. So there's definitely a need to do that in that location. I guess the other thing to remember is that with the easement and with the transition pole came a very large, for CIO would know the proper term, but clearance area where we're not allowed to plant. And actually underneath the mulch is a hard stand area that can facilitate vehicles to come on in moments of maintenance. So there's actually quite a large area there that's just not plantable. That doesn't mean that the areas surrounding it can't be further planted though.
Thank you. So I was specifically thinking of the Swansea Street side across the road from the neighbouring properties most impacted by the loss of not only trees but their visual amenity, the aesthetic, and the I guess the impact of those tall overhead transmission towers, which are more intense than what they had before. So more that side rather than potentially the side that looks out onto, say, Oat Street and the traffic lights. But my understanding is it's that side of the road where the access is through the gate in the bollards to allow Western Power's vehicles to get in. But is there sufficient in that area to use some of this money for a particular planting program, even if it's to really grow thick understory that will actually create a bit of a screen on that side for Swansea Street for the benefit of the residential community there, Mr. Doy?
Yeah, there's certainly, thanks, Mevin. Yeah, there's certainly opportunity to undertake further planting in that area, no question.
All right, thank you. Mr. Old, if there was to be some appetite by council to see some or all of this money made available for a specific project for this purpose, what would be the best way forward for that? Would it be for the Chief Community Planner and his team to allocate the type of money that would be needed for a project, and even if that didn't use all of the available funds, to suggest that then that money would go into the Urban Forest Reserve for that purpose, or would you recommend it be dealt with in some other way? Mr. Old?
Thank you, Mayor, for the question. The reason we recommended the Future Projects Reserve, it is not so specific as plant and equipment or roads. If you wish or council wish to put it to the UFS in next year's budget, that's fine. My recommendation generally would be to pick a reserve because we don't want to frit this away on operational stuff. As for the specifics of the project, bearing in mind we've got budget workshop in about 5 days, we could allocate that to reserve and give whoever's team it is to work up the proper project and how much that might cost. But I'm ambivalent to what reserve you'd put it to. If UFS is where you wish to go, that's fine.
All right, thank you. That's helpful. So we'll have a bit of a think about that in association with the budget workshop, because I'm sure other elected members might have some views about that as well. Are there any other questions in relation to this item? The easement? No? All right, thank you. So next item is item 13.3, 18 Kent Street, Victoria Park Bowling Club lease renewal. Councillor Minson, you had some questions?
Yes, thank you. There's a bit of discussion within the report about typical leasing arrangements. Do we have any comparable situations with peppercorn leases for that type of situation with a community sporting club?
I'm going to direct that question to Ms. Lebickas.
Thank you, Mayor Vernon. Thanks, Councillor Minson. No, we do not have comparable peppercorn lease arrangements within our current sporting club portfolio. The Perth Football Club occupies the grandstand under a peppercorn lease. However, during the negotiations for the new grandstand development, the town secured rent from them. There are other local governments who do offer peppercorn leases to bowling clubs. So the town of Cambridge has a peppercorn lease. City of Freo has a peppercorn lease, as does the City of Melville. However, both City of South Perth and the City of Stirling's don't. So it's a bit of a mixed bag.
Thank you. And a similar question, but relating to the proposed sinking fund. Do we have any similar arrangements within the town, where I guess this is getting, pretty niche, but where we've provided support, financial support for a particular, bit of capital upgrade works, and then therefore required a club to establish a sinking fund to cover renewals?
Ms Libicus?
Thank you, Mayor Vernon. It's my understanding that the sinking fund here was established in response to the first grant application, where the grant funders actually suggested that the sinking fund be set up. So it's not something that the town usually recommends or I guess, what's the word, tries to compel sporting clubs to do.
Councillor Minson?
That's it, thank you.
All right, thank you. Has anyone else got any questions in relation to this item? I've got a number of questions. I sent these through earlier today, and thanks to the staff for sending through some clarifications. So my first question relates to the rental valuation, where paragraph 5 indicates the rental valuation in 2014 was $60,000 exclusive of GST. And paragraph 11 of the officer's report says the 2026 valuation is $65,000 exclusive of GST. Can we have some clarification about why the valuation appears notionally on those figures to only have increased $5,000 in 12 years, despite there being some upgrades to the facility? Ms Libicus?
Thank you, Mayor Vernon. I'll throw across to the Manager of Property and Leasing, if that's okay with you.
All right, thank you. Mr Bailey, are you able to assist us with that, please?
Thank you, Mayor. If I'm understanding the question correctly, you're concerned that there's only been $5,000 growth in the lease income for the property at the time.
I don't know if it's about the growth in the lease income. It's about the difference between the two valuations, one being 12 years ago showing it was $60,000 exclusive of GST, and one being this month showing it's basically up to $65,000. Now, what that's based on depends on which valuer did it. I mean, obviously I know something about valuation methods, but curious to know if that's a proper reflection of the differences in the value between then and now. Mr Bailey?
Thank you, Mayor. So when the valuation was struck in 2024, it was struck by the same valuation firm as we use currently. Further to that, it's commensurate with valuation principles that when you have a very restricted use, and in this case a community use, you apply a discount rate on the proposed market for this site. So without the restriction of the community use and the very restricted use being a bowls club, you have a valuation that is closer to $130,000. However, in this instance, they apply a discount to that.
All right, thank you. I wanted to ask some questions with relation to paragraph 20 of the officer's report relating to rent reviews. Ms Libicus, are you happy for me to continue to ask these questions of Mr Bailey? All right, thank you. So the officer's report states it is recommended that rent be maintained at the current level with annual increases of 3% applied in accordance with the previous agreement and consistent with Policy 310. So my reading of Policy 310, which was adopted in 2020, doesn't make any reference to rent reviews at all for community facility leasing, let alone a requirement that annual rent increases should be set at a fixed amount of 3% or be set as a continuation of any previous arrangements. In fact, Clause 6G, which is the relevant lease provision, only states that the lease will be based on a rental amount. So because of that, on what basis should we continue to consider including an annual rent review in this lease? Mr Bailey.
Thank you, Mayor. The basis for continuing the rent and the rent increases as they currently are is the notion of a status quo relationship that the rent that the lease has. So we've progressed this very much on the basis of maintaining status quo, and that intrinsically has a 3% per annum increase to the rent, which has been customary for the prior 10 years. And that is also the current lease arrangement predates the policy 310. So I will certainly say that the policy 310 and the not including a annual rent increase in the community leasing space is perhaps an oversight, and it would be common practice to propose a minimum rate of increase per year, or perhaps a CPI increase per year. That would certainly be something that I would look to progress in the next foreseeable future as I get a little bit deeper into my role and sort of do a bit of a refresh on Policy 310.
All right, thank you for that. That does lead into my next question, which was to ask whether instead of a fixed 3% rent increase, whether an annual rent increase, if it were to be considered, that would be in line with CPI, or at least maybe based on an alternating year around CPI, be more a prudent way forward for managing an asset like this, given that then allows, as the market goes up and down, to both favour the tenant and the landlord. But it seems to me that you've suggested that something like CPI could be used. If that was something that council wanted to consider, if it was looking at an annual rent increase, what would your view be on that being included as one of the terms instead of a fixed 3% annual rent increase? Mr Bailey?
Thank you, Mayor. My view on accepting or putting forwards CPI as a mechanism for increasing rent would present a very balanced approach, and that would sometimes favour the proponent and sometimes favour the town. However, it would be out of line with Policy 310 as it currently stands, but ultimately with the view that that may be amended at some point, it could potentially come into line.
All right, so I do have a question then arising from your answer. How would the implementation of a rent review clause based on CPI be out of line with Policy 310 when Policy 310 contains no provision for an annual rent increase to go in a lease for a community-based organisation? Mr Bailey?
Thank you, Mayor. So there's currently no provision for increasing, so we would be inserting a provision for increasing that. There is no, it's a bit of a kind of tricky question. Ultimately, there is no mechanism currently, and we would be placing one in.
So in other words, whether the annual rent increase was a fixed 3% or it was CPI, neither of them are currently contemplated by Policy 310, not for a lease of this type. They are contemplated for a lease of our facility to a commercial entity, but not to a community organisation. So if that's fair to say, either way it would be inconsistent with the state of Policy 310 at the moment.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, that is correct.
All right, thank you. So I do have some other questions with regards to the proposal for the outgoings. I'm trying to get a handle and understanding of what this means. So there's reference to the annual emergency services levy that would be a term of the lease agreement. So do we have an average idea of the emergency services levy for this site, Mr Bailey?
Thank you, Mayor. The average is, I believe, 2,034, if I'm correct, per annum.
All right, thank you. In paragraph 23 of the officers' report, it says that the emergency services levy is required to be reimbursed. So I'm assuming it's the town that reimburses that, and if so, how much does the town pay on average for an emergency services levy reimbursement? Mr. Bailey.
Thank you for the question, Mayor. The current state of play is okay. So the current state of play is that the town does not recoup its emergency services levy. It is something that we are working as town officers to change, and we will be moving forwards with progressing recouping those funds. On an annual basis, I have it that we do not recoup in the realms of $135,000 in emergency services levies per year.
So that 135,000, that's across all of the town's owned facilities that are then subsequently leased to community-based organisations. Do I understand that to be correct?
Yes, that is correct. That covers some commercial leases as well.
Okay, all right, thank you. Now, I noted in the documentation that was provided to us, there was some comment that the bowling club were looking for a reduction or a waiver in relation to the annual water rates / sewage rates. Are you able to indicate to us whether the town knows what the annual water rates, which I assume includes sewerage costs, are on average for this particular property? Mr. Bailey?
Thank you, Mayor. The annual water rate is indicated from the club at $5,000 to $6,000 per annum. Unfortunately, we don't have the account for that particular property, so we are relying on information provided by the club.
All right, thank you. So does that indicate that to date the club has been paying the water rates as well as the water consumption for the property? Mr. Bailey?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, that's correct. It was worth noting that the predominant water use on the site is from town-owned bores.
Okay, thank you. Now, I also note that one of the terms that's proposed is in relation to the lease containing a term that requires the tenant, which would be the club, to pay annual council rates. Are you able to tell us what the average council rates are for this particular property, and does the club pay those rates to the town? Mr. Bailey.
Thank you, Mayor. As with the emergency services levy, there has been a program where we have not sought rates from properties that are community organisations within the town. This is an ongoing process where we will be rating the individual community organisations, and they are then allowed, or they are permitted to submit an application to the town to have those rates subsidised or abated up to 100%. So in future, it would be logical that they would approach the town and seek that abatement. For realms of cost, the rates on a property like that would be around about $11,000 to $13,000 per year.
All right, thank you. When Policy 310 was adopted, sometime after we adopted in one of the amendments, we actually took on to include provision for the town to pay the annual building insurance on the basis that town owns the building. And so that then meant that tenants under leases were no longer being required to pay building insurance, just their own contents and public liability insurance. Are you able to indicate how much the town pays annually on average for building insurance for this particular building, Mr. Bailey?
Thank you, Mayor. I have it that it is in the realms of around about $3,500 in insurance we pay for this property.
All right, thank you. My next question relates to maintenance. So under Clause 7 of Policy 310, the town is expressly stated to only be responsible for structural maintenance within the leased area, not general maintenance, compliance costs, or ongoing services such as cleaning. And this is in relation specifically to a lease that would apply to a community organisation occupying our facility. Paragraphs 24 and 25 of the officer's report state that in addition to structural maintenance for the facility, the town has paid for looks like approximately $3,500 per annum for preventative maintenance and compliance costs, which are typically indicated to be the tenant's obligation under a standard lease, and maintenance works of approximately $4,355 in the last financial year to support club operations and ensure the facility is safe and presentable, and that actually includes car park cleaning. Can you advise, did the town under these incur these maintenance and compliance costs, including the car park cleaning, as like a discretionary decision by the town in accordance with asset management plans or budgetary constraints or factors at the request of the club, because they were either not part of the existing lease that they have had, or the club wasn't in a position to pay for them, or another option because the town has covered such costs for other tenants of town properties in recent years, leading to a bit of a practice of doing that. Trying to understand which basis upon which the town has made an active decision to incur those costs. Mr. Bailey?
Thank you, Mayor. The costs that have been incurred for maintenance have been mostly through discretionary, and as part of that, it has been a mix of requests that have come through by the club to attend to maintenance issues and whatnot. This is a little bit of a grey area as to whether or not the provisions within the lease have been strictly enforced, and I would say that to date they have not been strictly enforced, and the town has taken responsibility for a building that the town ultimately own and has progressed some of those works.
All right, thank you. My next question relates to the special conditions that are proposed in the key terms, which is the attachment to the officer report, regarding specifically the sinking fund. So I understood that the club were proposing that they put in a fixed $3,000 per annum indexed, and it's those words, fixed $3,000 per annum indexed. I'm trying to determine what's the total value of what I consider to be a cap that's being sought to put on their contributions to the sinking fund. I thought that was what they were requesting. I just don't know what fixed $3,000 per annum indexed would end up meaning over the 10-year proposed life of this lease if it was the 5 years and the one option to renew were exercised. Like, what would we end up getting in terms of the sinking fund? What would we see them putting into it? Mr. Bailey?
Thank you, Mayor. So the provision of the sinking fund is predominantly for the repurpose or to renew the turf surface. So the current estimates are around about $100,000 to $120,000 to renew that surface, roughly 1/3 of the current cost to renew or to develop the site with the synthetic bowling surface. The way that the sinking fund ideally would work is that the requirement for contributions would meet that in full over the course of the lease. So effectively 120 divided by 10 would give you a rough figure of what we would ideally like to have in that account come 10 years down the track when we seek to, or the bowling club seek to renew that surface. $3,000 per year wouldn't quite meet the full expenditure of renewing that surface, and perhaps they could seek some grant funding, or the town would meet the shortfall.
Okay, all right, thank you. With the town's own expenditure on our asset for the facility, looking at capital investments that we've made by structural renewals, upgrades or new additions to the facility, noting that obviously I could ask you, but I'd be putting you on the spot to go back a good number of years. But in relation to, say, the current financial year 2025-26, are you able to elaborate on approximately how much money has been spent on maintenance work? Because you did indicate it's been a discretionary decision of the town to spend money on maintenance works as opposed to necessarily capital investment on the infrastructure. Mr. Bailey?
Thank you, Mayor. I have it as an estimate of $25,000 we've spent in the 25-26 financial year. Unfortunately, I don't have details that go back to very much further.
Okay, we could look at those potentially between now and the matter coming back to council. But I will ask you this question, and apologies that this question wasn't sent through beforehand. But the officer report seems to indicate that there is actually a significant gap between the club's position and the position the town wishes to take for the lease in respect to key areas: the annual rental, the question of the rent review, the question of the contribution to the sinking fund, the question of the maintenance, and it seems like there are some other issues that are there. So given that there is that, well, I'll rephrase this. Is it the town's view that there's a significant difference in the position between the town and the club, noting that you're recommending us to basically approve the execution of a lease agreement when it appears that the club probably is not agreeable to some of these terms? Mr. Bailey?
Thank you, Mayor. The town has proposed very much a status quo moving forward of this lease under the current circumstance of the uncertainty that surrounds the Macmillan Master Plan. The rent figure proposed by the town is certainly some way away from the peppercorn rent arrangement that is sought by the club. So far as this being a position that we are putting forwards, we are doing so on the ground that there doesn't appear to be a great deal of willingness to negotiate further by the club, and closing the gap between where the town currently is and where the club are, it seems to be somewhat of an impasse.
All right, so on that basis, can I ask you this then? And again, sorry there was no notification of this question. Would the position potentially be more favourably advanced towards reaching an agreement with the club if the recommendation to council were not firstly to authorise the CEO to execute a lease agreement consistent with the key terms and in accordance with the policy, but instead the recommendation was at first instance for council to authorise the CEO to make an offer to the club in the terms that you're proposing, to see if we can formalise their position more than what is currently here, because there isn't an attachment, for example, of a letter from the club saying this is our position, we're not moving, or we can move on some of these things. What we have is the officer's report with a proposal about the key terms and an explanation about why some of those key terms are important from the town's perspective. But I'm wondering if there's potentially another pathway forward that starts with an authorisation to make an offer and to allow a level of negotiation to occur that might see an actual lease agreement brought back to us for endorsement for execution. And I know that I'm catching you off guard with this question, but I'm really keen to understand what might be the options here other than we authorise the CEO to execute a lease agreement that the party we wish to execute the lease agreement says no. Mr. Bailey.
Thank you, Mayor Vernon. The idea of going back to the negotiating table with the club is certainly open, and I would be comfortable with progressing on that basis. I would possibly seek to have a clause or a direction within the resolution to say that execution of the lease is to be to the satisfaction of the CEO or something to that effect.
I certainly understand that there would be ways that we could potentially work that around to create the flexibility that was needed, but I'm trying to ascertain whether or not there's a slightly different tack than the recommendation we currently have, which is, as I say, authorise the CEO to execute the lease agreement and to do it as a deed and do all things necessary to make it happen. And it might be that a more nuanced approach might be what might be needed if elected members were of the view that there was a significant difference between the club's position and the town's position. Look, that probably, I've exhausted all the questions that I have. Might be other elected members who have questions on this item. No, looks like there are not. All right, thank you. I appreciate that. So that means that we move on to item 13.4, Lathlain Park West Coast Eagles Deed of Agreement. Councillor Minson, you've got some questions about this item. Thanks.
Yes, thank you, Matt. My question is, how do the proposed number of permitted games now proposed compared to the previous deed and the interim arrangement?
Direct that question to Ms. Lebickas.
Thank you, Mayor Vernon. There's actually no real difference between the two. It's just bringing the terms of the lease up to date, because we've now got the management plan that sits in and around it that has changed certain elements. So it's just how they access those games.
Thank you.
Any other questions about this item? No? All right. We'll move on to item 13.5, which is the tender TVP 2512 Waste Collection and Management Service. Councillor Minson.
Thank you, Mayor. Maybe I'll just seek some advice. I did send these questions through with some notice, but would they be considered confidential, the answers to those?
Mr. Old?
In my view, they would. They go to some level of detail around the tender and pricing mechanism that the proponents have put forward.
All right, thank you. So go to Mr. Douglas, the Manager of Governance and Risk. So under section 5.23 of the Local Government Act, I think when it comes to a tender that's been considered by council, that's a matter for which the council may close the meeting to members of the public in order to discuss that. If I've got that right, we would look at closing the agenda briefing forum for a period of time to the public to allow those questions. Mr. Douglas?
Yes, that's also my understanding, Mayor.
All right, thank you. So, Councillor Minson, to proceed with your questions, we'll need to close this agenda briefing forum to members of the public for that purpose. So, as this isn't a meeting of council, at 8:19 p.m, I'm going to propose that the meeting be closed to the public for the purposes of section 5.23. I think it's subsection 4, C of the Local Government Act. Thank you to the minute taker. On the basis that the matter to be discussed involves a tender that has been received by the town and is under consideration for award. and as such is covered by confidentiality. So if there are no objections to the elected members present, we'll now close the meeting to the public. It's now 8:20 p.m. and I'll ask the minute taker to please suspend the live streaming for the purposes of this discussion. So. All right, so welcome back those who've been waiting on live streaming for us to resume. We've concluded our questions on an item that required to be dealt with in confidence behind closed doors. We've now concluded item 13.5. There being no other items on the list that were listed amongst the officer reports. Item 15 is committee reports, of which there are none this month. Item 16, motion of which previous notice has been given. There are none. Item 17 is public participation time, which I'll now open at 8:44 p.m, but noting there are no members of the public remaining in the gallery, I'll close that at 8:44 p.m. Item 18, questions from members without notice on general matters. Are there any questions from elected members without notice on general matters? No. There being no such questions, item 19 is confidential matters, of which there are none on tonight's agenda. So at 8:44 p.m, we'll declare the forum is closed. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for your contribution. Thanks to the executive and staff for assisting us. And to those who joined us on live streaming, good evening.